Welcome to the second annual 1 in 3 Speakout. My name is Julia Redeker Flynn, and I am the campaign director of the 1 in 3 campaign, a project of Advocates for Youth in Washington, D.C. In 2014, we were honored to host the first ever online Speakout, where 100 people shared their stories, their real experiences with abortion, shattering the silence and honoring the long tradition of sharing abortion stories as an act of resistance. Today, we are speaking out again because the stakes are higher than ever. In a few short months, the Supreme Court will decide the most important abortion rights case in 2 decades. They will rule on whether the insidious law that closed most abortion clinics in Texas violates the right to abortion. 45 reproductive health organizations filed briefs urging the Supreme Court to once again uphold a woman's constitutional right to access safe and legal abortion services. Advocates for Youth was proud to be among them, submitting a unique brief compiled entirely of women's real abortion stories from the 1 in 3 campaign. These women come from a variety of backgrounds and each face different circumstances as they consider their pregnancy options. From Melissa, whose abortion allowed her to complete her education and establish an independent life, to Kathleen, a mother of 3 who was 3 months behind on her mortgage when she found out she was pregnant again, to Anne, who in 1965 sought an illegal and potentially life-threatening back alley abortion, and dozens more. All very different stories, but with this in common: they refuse to remain silent about their abortions. They are determined to make sure that decision makers, including the Supreme Court itself, understand that a person's decision to end a pregnancy is specific to them, their goals, their challenges, their relationships, their responsibilities, and their understanding of their place in the world. And so are we. That's why with this Speak Out, we are continuing the People's Brief. We are addressing the Supreme Court directly and demanding they listen to our stories. That's right, we're talking to you, Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Thomas, Scalia, and Kennedy, Justice Bader Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and Breyer, Justice Alito, and Kagan, and many of you here. You know that the United States, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime. Despite the fact that abortion is very common, we rarely talk about our decisions to end a pregnancy. For too long, conversations around abortion have been dominated by politicians and anti-abortion activists who use shame and stigma as a tool to silence people and to advance legislation that limits access to abortion services. Today, we are asking the court to listen to a different conversation, one that is grounded in the lived experiences of real people, one that works towards building community rather than isolation, compassion rather than shame. A conversation that recognizes access to abortion and the ability to plan when and if you carry a pregnancy to term is crucial to the ability to protect both your own future and that of your family, and which honors everyone's right to dignity and autonomy. I am privileged to be one of the hosts of this historic event. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to the many people who will be joining us later with their personal stories. We're grateful for this opportunity to host and bring together people from around the country to break through the stigma and shame people are made to feel around abortion and highlight people's real experiences and stories about abortion care. Some amazing folks are participating today. Among them, I want to mention Wendy Davis, former Texas State Senator, Liz Winstead, co-creator of The Daily Show and co-founder of Lady Parts Justice, Martha Plimpton, actress, co-founder of A is 4, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and Congressman Tim Ryan, Yamani Hernandez, Executive Director of National Network of Abortion Funds, Cecile Richards, President of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Elise Hogue, President of NARAL Pro-Choice America, artist and activist Sonia Renee, and many, many more. And finally, we want to thank the 900 plus people who have contributed their abortion stories at the 1 in 3 campaign website, www.1in3campaign.org. You are helping to shatter the stigma and protect access to abortion. If you're watching today and would like to support the work of the 1 in 3 campaign, please visit www.1in3campaign.org/donate. Right now, I am joined on set by my co-host, Sadie Hernandez, a 1 in 3 activist at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley.
Hey, it's an honor to be here. I'm really excited. I really love sharing abortion stories because The stigma and shame around abortion has just been so devastating and detrimental, especially in South Texas where I'm from. There's one abortion clinic left, and we're barely holding on to it. And so I'm really happy so we can be here, especially with everyone that's here and all these amazing women like Amy Hagstrom Miller and Wendy Davis. And yeah, I love this. I love 1 in 3. I'm so happy.
Thanks. We are also joined by Amelia Bono, the founder of Shout Your Abortion hashtag on Twitter. We're thrilled to be able to partner with Shout Your Abortion today. Amelia will be monitoring the 1 in 3 Speaks conversation and sharing them throughout the day.
Hi, it's such an honor to be here with all of you. This is one of the most exciting moments in my whole life, I think. And yeah, I'm just so excited to be helping out and continuing to elevate the voices of, as you said, real lived experiences and placing those at the center of this conversation, taking that conversation back, which should have belonged to us this entire time. But I think that the moment is now, right?
Yes, thanks, Amelia. If you would like to join the conversation, use hashtag 1 in 3 Speaks to share your story on air with us today, or tell us what you would like to say to the Supreme Court as they make their decision in this historic case. We're so glad you're here. And as we get started, we are also joined by Amy Hagstrom Miller, the founder and CEO, president of Whole Women's Health, the clinics that are the center of this Supreme Court case. We're so honored you're here with us today.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
So I wanted to start off by asking you, after this insidious law passed and shutting down a lot of clinics in Texas, you decided to bring this case all the way to the Supreme Court. What is at stake in this upcoming case?
So there is so much at stake in the upcoming case. I mean, as people keep referring to it as the sort of the case of a generation. Really, when it came down to it, I decided to challenge a really horrific law locally in the state of Texas, and it started in federal court in Austin. And then, ultimately, so many people said it's going to end up in the Supreme Court, but really, that piece of it, totally not in my control. So what was in our control is to say this is wrong, this is unfair. Women in Texas deserve to have the same rights in reality, not just on paper, that women all over the country do. And so the people who seek abortion services throughout Texas deserve our advocacy. And so it was very important to me to both do what we could to help people travel hundreds of miles and keep our clinics open as much as we could, while also really challenge this law on its face and say, this is unjust, this is unfair, this is putting an undue burden in the path of millions of people who deserve access to safe care.
Great, thanks so much. And can you tell us, how did you decide to bring this case in the first place?
I think there's so many things in hindsight, right? You don't know what it's like to be a lead plaintiff. I've had 10,000 of my emails subpoenaed by the state, every piece of financial paperwork, every mortgage, it's a phenomenal thing to go through, My deposition was 9.5 hours. I was in the witness stand for 5.5 hours. It's one of those things that nobody walks you through, this is how it's going to be, right? But all along the way, I always knew it's the right thing to do. And it's who I am as a person and who my company, what we stand for, is that people deserve our advocacy. This is a human rights issue. This is a justice issue. And while it may not be sort of convenient or simple or easy, I've never wavered on knowing that this is the right thing to do and that we're standing on the right side of history.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about Whole Women's Health itself and that organization?
Absolutely. So we are independent providers, which means that we're not affiliated with any sort of large, hospital group or Planned Parenthood. We're small, community-based independent clinics, and which is where the majority of abortions in this country are done, in small independent provider clinics. All of us who are part of the lawsuit, we're 3 independent providers in the state of Texas. I come to abortion care with a very holistic approach, knowing that women don't experience abortion only as a medical issue and only with their uterus, but we experience it as a cultural issue, as a societal issue. Some people have spiritual issues that they bring to the table. And so really wanting to create an environment that was almost like an oasis where people were welcomed as they are and allowed to experience the care and really have choices whenever possible, and meaningful choices. What kind of abortion would you like? Would you like a medication? Would you like surgical? Would you like sedation? Would you like your partner to be part of the procedure, your mom to be in the operating room? And so we've really broken down a lot of the sort of rigidity and stereotypes stereotypes and tried to create an environment where things are warm and welcoming and comfortable, and where people have dignity and compassion, as well as, of course, very professional and highly trained medical care.
Yes. So my last question is, what is your vision for abortion access in this country?
It's pretty simple, that all people should have abortion access whenever they need it, period.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining us. We are so honored that you're a part of the Speak Out today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm so glad you're doing it.
Great. All of us have a role in shattering the stigma and ensuring that we all have access to safe and legal abortion care. You can join the conversation today and tell us your story, or tell us what you'd like to say to the Supreme Court as they make their decisions in this historic case. Throughout the day, we'll be sharing stories, comments from the hashtag 1in3Speaks, or share your story via text by texting SHARE to 877-877. Together, we can make sure the Supreme Court knows that real people are at the center of decisions about access to abortion care. And with that, let's talk to our next guest. Sadie, who's joining us now?
Right now, we're joined by Gina, who will be sharing her story via Skype. Gina, please begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. You can listen me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Gina, when you're ready.
Okay, can I speak in Spanish?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, bueno, mi historia es cuando yo tenía 19 años, tuve un aborto en México. Yo soy de Morelos y aunque crecí en una familia muy conservadora y muy puritana y muy católica, eso no evitó que cuando tenía 19 años tuviera un aborto. Era demasiado joven, estaba a cargo de mis 3 hermanos de 14, 11 y 2 años. Mi mamá lamentablemente nos había tenido que dejar, se había tenido que ir. Yo tuve que dejar la universidad y mantener a mis hermanos. Obviamente en ese tiempo pues no tenía una pareja estable y de pronto estaba embarazada y tomé la decisión de tener un aborto. En México el aborto no era legal en ese tiempo, bueno, de hecho no sigue siendo legal, y busqué una clínica clandestina en la que puse en riesgo mi vida, y el problema no fue tanto encontrar el doctor ni conseguir el dinero, porque pude hacerlo. Lo difícil fue, lo más horrible fue que como era una clínica clandestina no tenía todas las medidas, todas las cosas de seguridad para proteger mi vida, proteger mi salud y bueno, obviamente mi vida estuvo en riesgo, hubo muchas complicaciones, no tuve anestesia general, solo fue una anestesia local, y bueno, estaba completamente consciente de todo lo que estaba pasando, no sentía dolor, solamente estaba sintiendo obviamente que me estaban haciendo algo y al final un doctor sumamente cruel, feo, mala onda, me enseñó como en un frasco y me dijo, mira, esto es lo que te estaba estorbando y lo vamos a tirar. Eso fue tan horrible, no sé ni siquiera cómo pude estar bien después de eso. Por muchos años viví con mucha vergüenza, con mucho remordimiento, sintiéndome que era la peor mujer del mundo. Realmente era horrible. Era una situación espantosa hasta que pasaron muchos años y pude encontrar otras mujeres que vivieron experiencias similares a la mía y pudimos tener esa conversación y yo pude sacar todos mis sentimientos y decir cómo me sentía y hablar y creo que he logrado de alguna manera superarlo. Ahora tengo casi 46 años, tengo una hija de 15 años maravillosa y ahora estoy bien, creo.
Gracias por compartir su historia. These are the stories the Supreme Court needs to hear. Gina, what message would you like to share with the Supreme Court today?
My message is that my body, my decision. Y tener un aborto no es una decisión que se toma fácilmente, pero es una decisión que solo corresponde a cada mujer. No le corresponde ni a los políticos ni a los líderes de fe tomar las decisiones. Este es mi cuerpo, esta es mi vida, esta es mi decisión y necesito que sea respetada. Y necesito que ni mi vida, ni la vida de mi hija, ni la vida de ninguna mujer corra ningún peligro cuando toma la decisión, la difícil decisión de interrumpir un embarazo. Ellos no tienen que decidir. Tengo que decidir solamente yo en mi cuerpo, porque ellos no están viviendo conmigo cada día, ni saben mi situación para que ellos tomen la decisión de decidir o no si yo interrumpo un embarazo.
That was awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Julia, who's our next guest?
Our next guest is Nancy Starner, who is the Director of Development and Communications at Preterm, the largest abortion clinic in Ohio, who's joining us via Skype to share her story. Nancy, please start whenever you are ready.
Thanks, Julia. My abortion story takes place in 1996. I didn't decide to have an abortion because to me, there was never a question to be decided. I had an abortion because I was pregnant and I didn't want to be. I was 24, living in New Orleans, working as a librarian in my first job out of college and starting grad school in public health part-time. It was the only time in my entire life, the only instance, still to this day, that I had sex, knowing I wasn't using the right protection. My period had been regular, like clockwork. I thought I knew where I was in my cycle, that the risk was low, and I wanted this guy to like me. It was completely my idea. It wasn't pressure that came from him. It was for me. I was crazy about him and wanted him to like me. Clearly, I was wrong about the risk, and I got pregnant. Over a month later, I started worrying that I might be pregnant. I took a pregnancy test, and I remember exactly what I said to the guy who, by then, was my regular boyfriend. I think I'm pregnant, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I can't have a baby. I felt so stupid. I was terrified, and I wanted that thing out of me as fast as possible. I called a counselor and was referred to a private practice where I was told there wouldn't be protesters, which was something I hadn't even thought of. My boyfriend came. I went back with a nurse who did a pregnancy test and an ultrasound, told me I was 7 weeks pregnant, and let me see the screen that showed a small speck inside my uterus. And then I met with the doctor, a friendly, paternalistic old man with a shock of white hair. He said that the state made him tell me the risk of dying from an abortion, and he helpfully added that the risk of dying in childbirth was much, much greater. Then I had to sign some paperwork and wait 24 hours. Even in 1996, there was a 24-hour waiting period in Louisiana. The next day at my appointment, everything went fine. They gave me an IV, which put me to sleep. I remember a nurse waking me up and trying to put my underwear on, but I wouldn't get dressed until I knew I wasn't anymore. She reassured me that everything was okay, that it had been about the size of a grain of rice, and that it was gone. When I woke up from a nap later that afternoon, the nausea was gone, and so was the fear. I felt like normal and so deeply relieved. I remember mentioning my abortion to a few people at the time. I don't remember feeling embarrassed or ashamed. Mostly, I recall people not knowing how to respond at all. Awkward silences. An exception is someone I had just met a few weeks after my abortion, who is now one of my dearest friends. Right away, when we first met, I told her about my abortion, and she told me that the essay that got her into college was about being both Catholic and choice. and we've been friends ever since. I have never regretted my abortion, not for a single minute. It was the right decision for me, and I would absolutely make it again.
Thank you for sharing your story, Nancy. If you would like to say one thing to the Supreme Court as they consider this case, what would you like to say to them?
I would ask them to consider how foundational access to abortion is for the human rights of women and everyone who seeks an abortion. I would also say that abortion really has the potential to let people live the lives that they want to live and to really make their lives great.
Great. Thank you, Nancy, and thanks for the work you are doing. Sadie, who's up next?
Right now, I'm delighted to welcome Kersha, who will be sharing her story.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. My name's Kersha, like Sadie said, and I am from a small town in Ohio. It's like your quintessential small town, high school football, cornfields. My little brother Jaden, I can remember when we were growing up, he had 2 goats named Dodge and Skittles. It's like literally a very, very, very small town. And growing up in this small town, we didn't have access to reproductive health care. There was no women's health clinic. There was no place that you could go to get abortion services right there in that small town without having to travel quite a distance. And so in 2005, when I went to the University of Cincinnati to start my undergrad career, I can remember my stepmom taking me to Planned Parenthood to get birth control for the first time. And we, pull up to Planned Parenthood, and outside stand all of these protesters. And I had never seen these folks before. I had never experienced something like this. So my initial thought was, where in the world did this woman take me to a place where, I was trying to get health care, and instead I was greeted with very unfriendly people on the outside who looked nothing like the women that were on the inside, predominantly women and predominantly women of color. And so I started getting, really involved in understanding what these protesters were actually doing. I started learning the difference between reproductive health, reproductive rights, and reproductive justice. And I almost became the spokesperson on my campus for people to come to ask about, Planned Parenthood services, to ask about birth control, and to ask about abortion. And so in 2009, I was about to graduate from the University of Cincinnati, and I had just got accepted into graduate school for a social work and public health degree, and I found out that I was pregnant. And it wasn't, the decision wasn't hard for me, but what was hard were the feelings of guilt and shame that I had that came from the media, that came from my partner at the time, who told me that if I were to have an abortion, how selfish of a decision that was going to be. And thank God I had the family at Planned Parenthood. I had other volunteers and people who were on my side to tell me that that was wrong. And I chose to have an abortion. And when I walked out of that Planned Parenthood Health Center for the first time in my life, I felt like I was the only one that got to make the decisions about my life and my body. And that I was the only person that had power over this temple, and that nobody, and especially not a man, was going to tell me what I couldn't do with my body. So I knew that this was the decision for me, and that decision has allowed me to go to graduate school, to work in this movement, and continue to, ask people to stand up and speak up for themselves when it comes to talking about abortion, and to really, shed this stigma. Thank you.
Thank you, Kersha.
That was great. So with all your experiences and your own story, what would you like the Supreme Court to know about this case?
Yeah, I think I would like the Supreme Court to know that this is not a privilege. Abortion should be a right for everybody. We don't know, what people's experiences, what their lived experiences have been, and we have to be able to understand people's lives as whole people, as whole lives, that we have so many different intersections that bring people to needing or to wanting to have an abortion.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Kersha.
Thank you. And right now we're being joined by Amelia Bono, founder of the Shout Your Abortion hashtag. Amelia will be sharing social media updates throughout the day, but right now she'll start by telling her own story.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kirsha. Thank you, everyone. This is incredible. I'm getting so into all these stories that I forgot that I was about to tell mine again, which it's interesting because although I've been talking about abortion incessantly for the last 4 months since Shout Your Abortion exploded in the way that it did online, I haven't talked about my own story in a certain amount of depth. And some of that is on principle because I just believe that oftentimes women feel like they must explain certain aspects of why they got pregnant or offer sort of just an extremely complicated narrative about why they made the choice that they did. And so I've never wanted to buffer the disclosure of my abortion by saying, I was being careful, I was only sleeping with one person, I really want to be a mom, but not right now. I want to finish graduate school. Most of those things are true for me, but that doesn't matter. And I think that it's really important that we recognize that and say that, you know, any reason is valid, and those reasons are no one's but yours to make. I will say about, and I completely just vibed with your story, Kirsha, in that I really felt from you that you were coming from a place of gratitude for that community that you had access to at Planned Parenthood, and which you identified as being primarily women of color, which to me just affirms the importance of having that space. And walking through those protesters and knowing that on the inside you are getting to a place where you're going to receive compassionate, excellent medical care, which was my takeaway from my experience. And ultimately, that feeling of gratitude is why when I did look down at that pregnancy test and see those 2 blue lines, I just immediately knew that I was going to be okay. I knew that I was going to be okay because I live in Seattle, Washington. I live blocks away from a Planned Parenthood, and it's a Planned Parenthood that I've gone since before I even had sex. And as you said as well, it's the first place where I ever felt as though my body is my own to control, and you know, society does not always allow women to feel that way. So I immediately knew that I was going to be supported by the people at that clinic. I immediately knew that I was going to be supported by all of the community and the family in my life, my chosen family, and you know, my friends and my family. And I am so lucky. I'm so lucky to have that kind of, you know, not only access to services, but just having that kind of support around me. But I don't want to feel so lucky, you know. So I went in to have an abortion, and I wasn't scared because I knew I had that support, and I didn't feel bad because I didn't want to be a mother, and it didn't hurt. You know, I've honestly had more alarming dental work done, and I never felt anything but just a profound sense of gratitude for having access to those services, for the work that abortion care providers do. But as I said, I don't want to feel lucky because ultimately any woman who does not have control over her fertility and is forced to procreate has lost her right to life. And I'm so glad to be a part of a day today where I think that we are all making ourselves clear that is how we feel, and that these stories are varied. They're all over the place. They are part of the range of human experiences that accompany sexuality. And so that's mine, you know? And it wasn't that big of a deal, which is interesting because it then became a really big deal, in part because it wasn't. You know what I mean?
Well, these are the stories and perspectives that our Supreme Court really needs to hear. Can you tell us all a little about how your Shout Your Abortion hashtag kind of blew up?
Yeah, totally. So the day after the House of Representatives voted to defund Planned Parenthood, I was in grad school for psychology at the time, and I was supposed to be writing a paper that day, but I just dissolved into emotions, and I was just so angry. Spent the day crying, and I just woke up the next day. Also, I had been having conversations in my life around that time with people close to me about how we are you know, we are rabidly pro-choice women, and we are women who feel that the ideological underpinnings of abortion stigma is created to hold us down. But so many of us have not talked about our abortions. Like, what is up with that? And so I just woke up the day after, which was September 19th, and I just, on a whim, wrote a status update saying, you know, that I had had an abortion at Planned Parenthood, that I was incredibly grateful for that service, and that not only was I not ashamed, but that I realized that my own silence was in some way being leveraged by the opposition, and that I was not ready, I was no longer going to give them that power. And at that point, I texted my dear friend, feminist writer, and hero of the world, Lindy West. And I think that literally what I said was, I just told Facebook about my abortion, lols, sorry. And then she was like, I'm gonna screenshot that and put it on Twitter. And she's got like 60-something thousand Twitter followers. That happened. She added the hashtag #ShoutYourAbortion. And immediately there was just like a deluge of, like, people just were ready for this. It became a conduit for people to tell their stories on all different platforms of social media and in real life. And in Seattle, we really just sort of ran with the idea. Like I said, people were just ready. And I think people are ready now and continue to be. And so now we're developing an organization, which is incredibly exciting to me. We're working on locking down some grant money, and we're gonna go nationwide, and we're gonna work really hard to try to facilitate the same space for change in other cities that we have been able to in Seattle.
Great. Thank you so much, Amelia. Your work has really blown up and really shown, you know, the world online what is possible, and you've done incredible work, and we're so honored that you're going to be joining us throughout the whole day to sort of monitor the social media and keep us on track and see what's coming next. So,
well, thank you so much, and I have a really hard time accepting props from people like you who have been laying the groundwork for years and years, so I'm just honored to be here.
Great. So can you tell us just a little bit about how folks can join the conversation?
Yes, absolutely. So we would love to hear from you. In order to tell us your story, you can tell us what you would like to say to the Supreme Court as they make their decision in this case in Texas, or you can also tweet or share your story your abortion story via social media using the hashtag 1in3speaks. You can also share your story via text by texting SHARE to 877-877.
Thanks for that, Amelia. Right now, I'd like to take the opportunity to ask a few questions of my co-host so we can get to know her a little bit better. So can you just tell us, Sadie, how you got involved in the movement for reproductive freedom?
Well, I got involved in the movement because I was living in Austin, Texas in 2013 when the filibuster started. I had heard about it like on the internet, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go down there and check it out. And that was the day Wendy Davis was filibustering. And so I actually, you know, it was the abortion storytelling that actually really got me into this movement, because Wendy Davis was there. She told her story, but she also told stories of other women who had sent her some like mail and stuff. And I was just so moved at how, sorry, let me gather my thoughts. It's just so like riveting and emotional. I'm just excited. It was just the abortion storytelling that made me realize that, wow, this is a thing that happens to everybody. And so HB2 is such a heinous law, and I really felt like I, as a young person who had, you know, the privilege to have time to become an activist, to do things like this. And so I've been keeping up with the repro justice movement. I became a volunteer with Planned Parenthood, and I started my own campus group down in South Texas, and I'm also helping out the organizations down there who were already laying the groundwork for repro justice in South Texas.
Thanks, Sadie. We are so honored to have you and a number of young student activists joining us today to sort of highlight the work that you're doing across the country.
And if you'd like to support me or the other students on campus across the nation, you can visit us at 1in3campaign.org. You can also donate, so you can go to 1in3campaign.org/donate. So yeah.
Thanks for all of your work, Sadie. All right, so who is up next? Can you tell us who's up next?
Up next, we have Candace here to share her story via Skype. Welcome, Candace. Whenever you want, you can just start your story.
Hi. So my story actually starts. I'm born in Texas, but La Familia grew up in, and I never really think about whether or not I was a choice because it's something that everybody was, but we never talked about it. However, I had moved to Texas during the summer of HB2, and I all of a sudden felt involved in a way I had never before. Faced with the realities of what is a state that's possible to reproductive rights. So that I was my husband and nurses you're waiting in line for 10 hours chance to speak. And like everyone else in Texas, I was devastated when it passed. And I wanted to continue to be involved in a way that's bigger than what I'd been before.
Hi, sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We're having some technological difficulties. We're going to work on that and we're going to come right back to you. So sorry to interrupt you, and we'll come right back. Thanks again. All right, our next story comes from artist Fabiana Rodriguez, who created this amazing piece to share about her abortion story. Go ahead.
My name is Fabiana Rodriguez, and I'm an artist and an activist. My parents are immigrants, and I was their firstborn, and they invested everything they could into me. They put me in after-school math and science classes, after-school tutorial, bilingual programs, but my parents never taught me how to have a relationship, and they never talked to me about what kind of things I liked in people or what would attract me. It was almost like this big enigma. So many times as I was growing up, I had to perform for people, and that was the way that I got attention. And with my parents, I had to perform as the exceptional student and be all about math and science and be an overachiever. And with young men, I had to perform as kind of the sexy girl in order to get the kind of attention I wanted from them. And then when I finally had a chance at kind of being myself and really following what I wanted to do, which was to be an artist, right around that time is when I got pregnant. And I had told my lover that I was pregnant, and within a few days, he was on a plane to Chicago. And I was just in disbelief that he wouldn't answer my calls, that I couldn't find him, that he literally had disappeared. And so I had to have the abortion on my own. I had to find someone to drive me. I didn't tell my parents. And I had my abortion, and I didn't have regrets at all. In fact, I felt a sense of relief. And it taught me that, number one, I hadn't developed the tools to really assess who I was sleeping with or what to ask for or even how to negotiate what I wanted, but I also didn't have the lens to make decisions. I really thought this person was gonna be there for me, and when they weren't, I was like, wow. And here I am excelling at all aspects of my life. I'm, doing amazing art. I'm building websites. I'm, getting straight A's in my class. I'm being an exceptional person, and yet my love life is just in shambles. The reason I came out about my abortion was because in 2012, during the onslaught of anti-abortion laws, I realized that silence was costing us political power, and that everyone here saw a talented, empowered, young Latina woman, and if they only knew my abortion story, they would realize that behind all of these ways that we perform our excellence, there's also a lot of suffering that we don't talk about. And that actually we need to cast light on that, because when you have that suffering in the shadows and you feel isolated about everything from sex to abortion to love, then you can't really have a revolution. You can't transform that if you're in the darkness. And so I decided to come out. I didn't come out to my parents till just a few months ago. And it was empowering because I realized that the thing that I could do to change the way people perceive abortion is to share my story.
Thank you, Fabiana, for sharing your story with our audience in the Supreme Court. Joining us now is Dana. Dana, can you tell us your story?
Sure. In the summer of 2009, my husband and I were so excited. We were expecting our second baby. We had a 2.5-year-old son, and we were 7.5 months pregnant when we went in for a routine sonogram. During that sonogram, the doctors noticed a slight elevation in the ventricles of our baby's brain, and they sent us on for further testing. So 2 weeks later, I was sent for an MRI where we actually had pictures taken through my belly of our baby's brain to see what was going on. We had been sent expecting there really not to be anything there. There were some concerns with my son that turned out to be nothing, not related to this issue at all. And when we saw the MRI images, we didn't have to be a specialist to know that something was gravely wrong. The baby was missing, she was missing parts of her brain. There were other areas that were significantly malformed and underdeveloped. And basically what we saw and what we were told and what we know to be true is that our daughter was not going to be compatible with life. We were stunned, devastated, and heartbroken. And we asked lots of questions. We met with many, many different doctors, and the bottom line was our daughter was going to die one way or another. And we had a choice that we could make. We could either give birth to her and watch her seized to death, have a resuscitation order put in place that would keep her, I won't even say alive, would have kept her being, but not living. She was incapable of, would have been incapable of swallowing, sucking, breathing, eating, feeding, anything without significant medical intervention. And that she would have had seizures 70% of the time. And she would have had absolutely no quality of life. So my husband and I came to a decision actually quite quickly. We were so grateful that we could make the choice of abortion. We were so thankful that we actually could get quality care. What we were also stunned by was that we'd have to travel across the country. I live in Maryland. We had to go to Colorado to the only doctor at the time that was performing late-term abortions because our diagnosis came 6 weeks after Dr. Tiller had been murdered. We had to travel on our own dime. We didn't really have $17,500, which is what the abortion cost readily available or available at all. We had to pay airfare on top of that. Wasn't a planned vacation or trip. And when we got to Colorado, we were so heartbroken and so devastated, but we were confident in our decision. We were grateful that we could say goodbye to our daughter the way that we felt was the best for her, for our family, and for our son. And you know, my story is one that is with me. It's part of my family cloth. I really am so grateful that we could get the care that we received so that we could go on to have, and we do have, 2 more beautiful, amazing children that we wouldn't have had if we couldn't have had the care. We also wouldn't have had, because I don't believe our marriage would have survived being forced to make a decision that wasn't right for us. And we have a son who he knows about his sister that isn't with us, and he is the same loving, trusting, happy, outgoing little boy because we have a solid family foundation that I know would not exist had we been forced to make a choice that we did not want to do.
Thank you. These are the stories we need to hear, and so does the Supreme Court. Thank you for sharing your story. It was really beautiful. Julia, would you like to introduce our next guest?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I'm happy to be able to share this pre-recorded message from Dr. Jamila Parrott, an OBGYN and abortion provider.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jamila Parrott, and I'm an OBGYN. As an OBGYN, I see firsthand the impact that pregnancies, both planned and unplanned, have on the lives of women and their families. I'm not an epidemiologist or a statistician. I'm not a politician or a legislator. I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist. And I take care of women. I take care of real women every day who are forced to choose between buying safe and affordable birth control and buying food for their families or books for school. I take care of real women who deserve the chance, the choice to control their own lives. I thought a lot about that word choice when I was considering what to say today. And not the word choice in the way that's become so familiar to many of us who do reproductive health work every day, but really focusing on who gets to choose and who doesn't. The chance, the opportunity, the power to choose is a privilege in this country, and it's not one afforded to all of us equally. In my office, I understand that all choices are not experienced equally, and they are not all judged equally. But I also understand that this privilege of choice should not be a privilege, but should be a right. The choice to control your own body, your own fertility. It should not be shrouded in secrecy and veiled in shame. It should not be debated in the halls of Congress and manipulated for political gain. Abortion has become an inflammatory wedge issue that's being used to distract and detract from real issues like building strong families, economic and educational attainment, and health. 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime. Think about that. These are not some unreputable women living in the shadows. These are our mothers, our sisters, our friends. These are our patients, my patients. And as an obstetrician and gynecologist, I believe that I have a moral imperative to help my patients move through this decision-making process with dignity and grace, and not to shame or condemn them. And I will continue to provide the comprehensive health care that my patients need and deserve. And sometimes, yes, sometimes that includes abortion. I wanted to speak to you today to share the stories of the women whose lives I share in my office every day. It is a privilege for me to share their stories, because in sharing their story, I share my own. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Pear, and thank you so much for the work you do. I'd like to welcome everyone back to the 1 in 3 Speakout. In a few short months, the Supreme Court will decide on the most important abortion rights case in 2 decades. They will rule on whether or not the insidious law that closed most abortion clinics in Texas violates the right to an abortion. 45 reproductive health organizations filed briefs urging the Supreme Court to once again uphold a woman's constitutional right to access safe and legal abortion services. Advocates for Youth was proud to be one of them, submitting a unique brief compiled entirely of women's real abortion stories from the 1 in 3 campaign. And now we're continuing our People's Brief. We are addressing the Supreme Court directly and demanding that they listen to our stories. As many of you know, here in the United States, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime. Despite the fact that abortion is very common, we very rarely talk about our decisions to end a pregnancy. For too long, conversations around abortion have been dominated by politicians and anti-choice activists who use shame and stigma as a tool to silence people and to advance legislation that limits access to abortion services. Today, we are asking the court to listen to a different conversation, one that is grounded on the lived experiences of real people, one that works towards building community rather than isolation, compassion rather than shame, a conversation that recognizes that the access to abortion and the ability to plan when and if you carry a pregnancy to term is crucial to the ability to protect not only your own future, but that of your family, and which honors everyone's right to dignity and autonomy. I'm privileged to be one of the hosts for this historical event. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to the people who will be sharing their personal stories with us. In the first hour of our Speak Out, we heard from Amy Hagstrom Miller, the founder of Whole Women's Health, the clinic that is at the center of this Supreme Court case. We heard from Dr. Parrott sharing her point of view as an abortion provider. And now we're going to be speaking to many other abortion providers today. All of us have a role in shattering the stigma and ensuring that we have access to safe and legal abortion care. You can join the conversation today, tell us your story, or tell us what you'd like the Supreme Court to know as they make their decision in this historic case. Throughout the day, we'll be sharing stories and comments from the hashtag 1in3Speaks. You can also share your story by texting SHARE to 877-877. Together, we can all make sure the Supreme Court knows that real people are at the center of this decision about access to abortion care. And if you're watching today and you'd like to support the work of the 1in3 campaign, please visit www.onein3campaign.org/donate. I'm joined this hour by my co-host Miriam Young. Miriam is the Executive Director of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you.
I'm glad. Are you glad to be here?
I'm glad to be here.
Okay.
It's an awesome hour. You've been doing great.
I'm excited. I love this.
Awesome.
So we would also like to introduce our first Skype guest. Or do you want to do that? I've been doing it all. You can do it.
Awesome. This is my first shot at it, so I'm going to follow your good example. Right now, we're going to be joined by Kathleen Bedoya, one of the creators of the hit Hulu show East Los High. Kathleen, welcome to the Speak Out, and thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. This is an amazing campaign. I'm really glad to be here.
Kathleen, I've had a chance to watch a little bit of the show. I don't know if everyone else watching us has. Can you tell us a little bit about the show?
Yes, East Los High is a dramatic original television series that's airing on Hulu. And we're heading into our 4th season. And it focuses on the lives of young Latinos growing up in East Los High, in East LA, California. And in the show, we take a deep dive into real life situations that youth in inner city schools and are experiencing. And one of the main objectives is to address sexual health and reproductive justice issues that are impacting the Latino community.
It's incredible. And for folks who haven't watched it, it's really, really hot. So we're about to show a clip from the show where 2 characters talk about abortion. Can you set up the clip for us?
Sure. The clip you're going to see is one of my favorite scenes so far, because it was such an important conversation that is really being had, especially with characters like our characters. The main protagonist, one of the main protagonists, her name is Jessie. She's 16. She's pregnant. For the first time, she has unprotected sex. She gets pregnant. And she decides to marry her boyfriend. So on her wedding day, she is having a lot of serious doubts about some of the decisions that she's making. And she's really in a very difficult situation and in a conflicted state. And so she asked for the advice of her trusted aunt, Paulina, who also grew up in East LA, but has since then moved on and created a really great career for herself. So that's pretty much what happens right before.
How old were you when you got pregnant?
I was around your age. I struggled with my decision.
Did your parents know?
No, it was my decision. Besides, your grandmother was so religious that I knew she would think it was wrong.
But you didn't think it was wrong?
No, I didn't. And I still don't. It's not to say it was easy.
What was the hardest part?
I just wondered if there was a spirit that was getting ready to come and be with me. And I had to tell that spirit to wait. that was hard. But at the same time, and I was happy too because there's something that I can look forward to in the future.
Did you ever regret it?
No. It was difficult, but it was the right thing for me.
Wow, that was such an amazing, powerful scene. Can you tell me why you felt this conversation was necessary for the show?
Well, if anytime we thought that anytime you're going to discuss sexual health with young people, we need to discuss all the different options. And what we try to do on the show is present options without judgment or morality or politics, just information, so that teenagers can make the best decisions for themselves, and that they have the right to do that. And that acts, and then on top of that, we provide all the resources of places where they can go to for more information, before and after terminating a pregnancy, decisions to make. In the show, we discussed all the different options for Jessie with doctors. She goes to a clinic, she talks to people, and the reason we think that's so important is because nobody's talking to them. There's so few people that are talking to them with the right information and without morality and judgment, and we just thought that this was a great space to be able to inform teenagers, and then they could make whatever decision they want to. And also, particularly as it relates to Latinos, we do a lot of research in every topic that we discuss on the show, and we found that there's a lot of support for all different options. When it comes to pregnancy, it's not what people think, that religion reigns so heavily. A lot of Latinas and Latinos support the decision to have an abortion, and we wanted kids to know where to go to do it safely. What happens emotionally? Where can you seek help in all different ways? And so that's why we thought it was a space to do it, because there's no other outlets really for some of these youth to find out this information.
Well, right on. You're doing incredible work, and thank you for including this important conversation in your work. For folks who haven't watched, Hulu is the place to see it. So thank you, Kathleen, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now I'm really happy to share this pre-recorded message from Renee Bracy Sherman.
My name is Renee Bracy Sherman. When I was 19, I had an abortion. I am one of the 1 in 3. I want the Supreme Court to hear my voice. I want you to know that my abortion was the best decision of my life. When I was 19, I was not ready to become a parent. I knew that the best decision for myself, my future family, and my life was to have an abortion. I was in a relationship where it was just toxic. My partner wasn't respectful of me, and we decided that it was time to break up and that abortion was the best decision for us. I wasn't doing very well in school, and after my abortion, I was able to recommit myself to school and to my life. And today, I graduated from undergrad. I have a master's degree from Cornell University, and I'm able to dedicate my life to supporting young people and low-income families and everyone to make the best decisions for whatever it is that they need. Everyone deserves the right to decide when, how, and if they become a parent. We must protect the right to access safe, legal, and affordable abortions. Everyone has the right to decide what to do with their body. Can you hear me, Supreme Court? I don't regret my abortion. I'm happy about it. It was the best decision of my life. And 10 years later, I would do it again. I'm happy.
Thank you for sharing that, Renee. Right now, I'd like to welcome our next guest, Dr. Sarah Mershine, who is an OBGYN at Sorry, let me double check this.
Falls Church Health Center.
Falls Church Health Center. Sorry, just a lot of notes today. So, how are you, Dr. Sarah?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come here and talk with you all today.
Thank you, and it's great that you're here. So as an OBGYN, you've chosen to help women in need of abortion care. So why are you personally so committed to being an abortion provider?
That's an important question that's easy to answer for me. I've been in women's health now for over 30 years, and I've been helping women in all areas of their lives, all times of their lives. And at the end of my career, in the last 10 years or so, I have increased my interest in abortion provision, mostly because it is the one area where I can really give back women their lives, where every patient walks out feeling relieved, every woman has control again, every woman can decide for herself what's important. And for me, that's an easy procedure to provide, and so many women benefit from it.
Great. It sounds like you have a large, diverse patient base, I guess. Can you tell us some of the common barriers that these women have told you about while they're seeking abortion care?
Well, the face of abortion is the face of America. Women of all different backgrounds have abortions. Women are proportionate to their in the population in terms of religion, all different backgrounds. And most women do have to find some barriers that they have to overcome to seek abortion care. And from the day you make an appointment until you actually see the doctor, you've already taken time to think. So we don't need any barriers in terms of waiting. And for working women and for poor women, those waiting times are very, very important because they cost a lot of money, they cost a lot of time, childcare issues become important. We also don't need the government telling us what kind of regulations we need. We need medical associations who can change and update the standards of care regularly, controlling these issues. And in fact, why Women's Care Center is just drawn out separately from all other medical care is only a reflection of a group of old men making decisions about young women who are well enough equipped to make their decisions themselves. Yes, mostly old white men making decisions for all of us when we know best, we know what to do.
And what would you like the Supreme Court to know for their next case?
Well, I would like to uphold every aspect of Roe in terms of privacy, but I'd also like to recognize that that some of these laws are only aimed at women, that we don't have equal protection unless we only have laws that pertain to the whole population. These aren't laws that have anything to do with health or safety. They represent undue burden to the women who are seeking medical care.
Thank you so much, and it's great to have an abortion provider's perspective on an issue of abortion, which is exactly like you said.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
And now we're being joined by Amelia Bono again, founder of #ShoutYourAbortion on Twitter, who will be updating us on what's going on in our social media.
Hello, we're hearing from a lot of people who have had abortions today, a lot of providers and other people who are working to make this world safer for people who make that choice. So let's see what's going on social media right now. We're hearing from Feminist MD, who says, "This is not a privilege. Abortion should be a right for everybody," which Kersha spoke to that earlier. And I think that that's so important. It's such an important reframe. Why have we, this concept of gratitude keeps emerging. Gratitude for folks like yourself who have been in this field because of compassion ultimately. But I'm sick of being thankful for a basic human right. I'm no longer thankful that I'm able to vote. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to be thankful anymore that I don't have to become a mother, and I don't want folks like you to have to deal with a cultural environment that's so hostile towards people receiving receiving medical care that they are not, it's just, let's stop having to lean on gratitude so much. Let's change the culture. you know?
It's likely this afternoon when I go to work in Virginia, I will walk through a gauntlet of protesters.
Well, yeah.
And the patients, more important than me, they will have to go through the walk of shame. These people who really shame them and don't help them and force them to delay their pregnancies longer and at risk because they're fearful and the stigma that is associated with it, seeking abortion care.
I'm sure that you have seen stigma, take lives. So thank you for continuing to do this work in the face of that. I want to look at this other tweet from Tanis. I didn't decide to have an abortion because there was never a question. I identify with that so much. 1 in 3 speaks, shout your abortion. I think that this is also a really good point because we're often taught that, or we just, I think, sort of learn as women and as, people who have uteruses or might choose abortion at some point, that abortion should be an agonizing decision for every individual unless you are a bad person, right? Clearly, that's not the people that you see in your clinic always, is it?
No, many people know right away that this is the wrong time, or they have other children to take care of, elderly parents to take care of. They don't have enough money to parent the way they want to be good parents, or they want to finish school so that they can be better parents and have children when they're older and better prepared. No, for many people, it is a quick decision, although it doesn't mean that it is without depth or certainty or appreciation that it's a decision that will change their lives. And for most of these women, for the better.
Right. Because as we know, as I'm certain that you know, the most commonly reported emotional experience that is correlated with abortion is relief.
Relief.
Right?
Relief.
Also not a common, not a part of the dominant cultural script, and one that we are challenging right here today as we hear from so many women who have so much gratitude for folks like yourself who were so relieved to not have defaulted into parenthood because they weren't ready, or maybe they didn't ever want to be parents, That does not make you a bad woman, by the way. So I think that that's our social media update for this hour. But I look forward to seeing you all again soon. And don't forget to tweet your stories if you are ready, #1in3speaks. And if you haven't had an abortion, but you want to talk to us about what you would tell the Supreme Court, please do that as well. You can also share your story via text by texting SHARE to 877-877.
Thank you, Amelia. And keep sharing your stories and what you would say to the Supreme Court, just as she said. And
now, sadly, we're going to say goodbye to Sadie, my awesome co-host. Thanks for all the work that you do.
It was really awesome to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadie.
Right now, I'm happy to share a pre-recorded message from my friend Louise Melling, the Deputy Legal Director for the ACLU.
Hi, I'm Louise Melling, and I'm a Deputy Legal Director at the ACLU. I've never had an abortion, but I've spent my entire legal career fighting to protect and expand access to abortion. I do that for lots of reasons. Most important, I do that because abortion is about women, it's about our dreams, it's about our needs, and it's about our lives. And I think that what the law says about abortion says a lot about how we think about women. When I go forward in doing this for 20 years, and it's just not always been easy, as you might know just from reading the papers, I'm doing it in part because I'm carrying the dreams of my mother, and I'm carrying my own dreams. My mother was born when women couldn't vote. When my mother went to college, which was just an incredible privilege for a woman of her time, many colleges closed their doors to women. When my mother was growing up, married women couldn't even necessarily get credit in their own names. And throughout all her years, all her childbearing years, there was no access to legal abortion. My mother had studied drafting, she'd studied economics, she'd studied art. She'd had this good fortune to go to college. She dreamed of using that. She dreamed of learning more. She dreamed of working outside the home. She dreamed of having children. She had children, and she had a number of pregnancies that weren't planned. she had pregnancies where she didn't imagine she would have those, and so she didn't imagine having kids at home from the time she was 27 until she was 60. She'd had a really severe episode of postpartum depression. She hadn't wanted to have children after that. When I look back, I think about what she saw, I think about the changes she saw in women's lives, and I think about things she said to me. She talked often about her mother, whom she loved, and she talked about what her mother said to her. It's a man's world, and the sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be. And my mother always said, I never accepted that. And she wanted different. She wanted different for me. She wanted different for other women. She wanted us, every woman, to be able to go to school. She wanted us to be able to have jobs that men had. She didn't want us to be shut out because we were women. She wanted us to be able to have children. She wanted us to be able to have love. She wanted us to be able not to have children. She wanted women to have opportunity. She wanted women to be able to do what men did, and she wanted better for men. My father was the son of a bricklayer. It was important to my father that he prove that he could care for his family. That meant that he didn't want my mother to work. She didn't want him locked. She didn't want her locked. I'm here because I care. I'm here because I want better. I want better for men and women. I want better for my nieces and nephews. I want better for my grandniece, my grandnephews. I want us to resist all the messages that tell us we're locked in. I want us to resist those laws that say we're supposed to be mothers. I want us to resist those laws that say we're too stupid to choose, too stupid not to have to go through a waiting period. I want different, I want more, I want better. I want the states, the state legislatures, Congress, and the courts to hear us. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Louise. Now I'd like to welcome my new co-host, Brianna, a student at Harvard University and an activist with the 1 in 3 campaign. Welcome, Brianna.
Hi, Miriam. It's really great to be here. It's such an honor to be surrounded by people sharing their stories today, and especially sharing their stories in a safe environment with other people who are around to support and amplify the voices of women who have had these experiences and want to make them known to people in power.
Right on. Being a host is really fun. We get to introduce people.
I'm very excited.
Who's joining us now?
So now I'm happy to introduce Christine, who's joining us via Skype to share her story. Welcome, Christine. Tell us your story whenever you're ready.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me. I kind of started my story when I was 18, 2001. I was very sure I was not a parental figure, or the kind that would make a good parental figure. Come from a violent background. My husband and I were both very sure that we were not ready for children, especially at 8. We had lots planned. Unfortunately, we had a control mishap, which happened like and at the time we lived in Arizona, so we got caught up in the all the rules and the restrictions that apply in that state. So we missed the deadline for abortion.
Christine, I'm so sorry. We're having a lot of difficulty with that feed, but we're going to get right back to you after we reset it and reinitiate it. So just be on hold for us for a minute. And in the meantime, I want to introduce our next guest, Mariam. I'm Miriam. You're Mariam. This is Brianna. Thank you for coming here and sharing your important words with the Supreme Court during our People's Brief.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. As the host, Brianna and Miriam said, my name is Mariam, and as background, I am originally from Texas, born and raised to both Latino and Middle Eastern parents. I was fortunate enough to go to Harvard, majored in neurobiology, but my passion laid in ensuring that others had the same opportunities as me. So after college, I went to rural Kenya to work on education and health programs. And while in Kenya, I was dating a guy who was also there working on similar programs, and the condom broke. And the morning after pill didn't work. And being in rural Kenya, there was limited access to pregnancy tests. So I had to have a friend go to a nearby town, nearby several hours away, and bring a few pregnancy tests back. And I took one night, it came out positive, and I didn't believe it. I took 2 more the next morning, same thing, and I didn't believe it, because I thought I had taken sufficient precautions to prevent an unintended pregnancy. So then I went to a doctor, the doctor's several hours away in that town, and he told me I was pregnant, and I finally believed it. And I knew at that moment I couldn't raise a child. I was not ready to have the children that I wanted to have in the situation, give them the life that they deserved. And I knew I was going to have an abortion. So I traveled back to my side of rural Kenya, and I spoke to Planned Parenthood at night. Over the phone, they gave me my options, they gave me information, and I scheduled an appointment. I left Kenya on my pre-scheduled departure day, and I was leaving a country, Kenya, where abortion is illegal, to a country, the United States, where abortion is legal to a certain extent. But because I was getting a medical abortion and I was going to be arriving in Texas just under the deadline that would allow me to obtain a medical abortion, I had to deal with the 24-hour waiting period, this ridiculous regulation in Texas, and the mandated counseling in the London airport over the course of a layover. I found a corner, I spoke on the phone, and the provider had to tell me essentially some of these lies about, for example, the likelihood of breast cancer increases if I were to get an abortion, when we've seen several studies refute that fact. Even scientific societies like the American Cancer Society say that that's invalid. And I had to sit there listening to this, even though I had spent sufficient time going through the information myself and making the decision that I needed to for my body and for my life and for my future children. So I finally arrived in Texas. I went to Planned Parenthood, and I received the pills for a medical abortion. I share my story for 3 reasons. The first is, I never thought I would get pregnant like that. I used condoms. I took the morning after pill, and yet I still got pregnant. These things happen, and I feel very lucky that I have the opportunity to be able to have access to abortions for me and for others when these things accidentally happen. The second reason is that I never thought I would have an abortion. I was pro-choice, but I thought that if I had a pregnancy, I would keep it. But I realized you don't know until you see those positive tests what you're going to do. And I think this country is lacking a sense of empathy because they're not able to put themselves in women's shoes. And I exhibited that lack of empathy when I was so sure that I knew what I would do in this situation. And the third reason I share my story is to break this stigma, because this stigma prevented me from knowing another woman who had an abortion when I wanted to speak to another woman about her experiences. And this stigma silenced me for several years. And this stigma is the thing that's going to lead our country back to the harder and more unforgiving and less understanding the country we used to be. And I won't stand for that. And none of the women here at this event will stand for that either, because instead of this stigma silencing us, we're here to silence the stigma.
Right on.
Amazing.
Amazing, powerful story. I'm dying to know if Judge Scalia were sitting right here listening to you, what message you got for him?
So my story is one of the stories in the Advocates for Youth amicus brief, and I shared that because it's important for the Supreme Court to know the implications of their decisions on the daily lives of women. They're going to have to determine whether these regulations inflict an undue burden on women, and they're only going to find that out when they see these obstacles that women encounter when they're accessing their legal right to abortion. It's quite clear. And it's a facade that these regulations are out there to promote women's health, that those that support the restrictions insist. And there's no rigorous scientific evidence that shows that these regulations should be in place when we know abortions are a very safe procedure. And to be honest, I would lose faith if the highest court in our country this court that has individuals who are supposed to represent some of the best of us feed into the lies and accept these laws and prevent women from accessing what was already deemed within their legal rights. I would lose faith if the court decided to accept these laws that will end up having negative impacts on American women and their families every day.
Don't lose faith.
I'm trying not
We
to.
won't know what happens, but we'll organize regardless.
That
Thanks
sounds
for
good.
being with us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to take a minute to chat with my co-host. So Miriam, I'm so happy to be joining you on set today. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your work with NAPOF.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. NAPOF, the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. We are the nation's only national organization working with, organizing, and representing the hopes, dreams, and needs of Asian American Pacific Islander women and girls. There are over 9 million AAPI women and girls in this country. And unfortunately, not many people know about us, and not many people know about some of the challenges that exist in our community. So NAPOF is all about making sure the voices of Asian American Pacific Islander women and girls are heard and amplified, that we're developing leaders, and that policymakers are writing laws that can impact us in positive ways rather than setting up some more barriers for us.
That sounds like absolutely amazing work. Can you tell us a little bit more about the specific challenges and barriers facing Asian American and Pacific Islander women living in the United States around reproductive health care access specifically?
Yeah, I think there are many. One of the most basic ones is that even though there are so many of us and our community is so rich and diverse in terms of ethnicity and in terms of where we live, in terms of languages we speak, one of the predominant things that gets told about our community is that we're the model minority. So this model minority myth that makes people look at every Asian and assume that they're well off, that they have no problems, that they're rich, has been a huge barrier, because the reality is Asian Americans are the fastest growing demographic of poor in this country. And the other reality is that 2/3 of Asian Americans are foreign born. And while many of us speak English, when it comes to sensitive or personal issues or important issues, many of us might prefer to actually speak in our native tongue. And our community speaks over 100 different languages. So accessing reproductive health care and finding a provider who can speak your language is really important and also really difficult. You know, it's particularly important to point out that HB2, right, the subject of the SCOTUS case that we're here to talk about somewhat, Texas is the 3rd largest state with Asian Americans. There are over 1.5 million Asian Americans living in Texas. And they're not all in Houston. Well, a good many are in Houston. But many of us are spreading out, you know, moving into this great country and living in different parts. And the isolation that can be experienced by an immigrant woman, particularly an immigrant Asian woman, who already people assume have no problems or are invisible, this case and this law has extreme impact on the people in my community who might already be on the margins. And there aren't enough culturally competent care service providers without even, you know, needing to drive hundreds and hundreds of miles to find something. So we're here to make sure that we have a positive outcome on this case. And even if we don't, I think this is such a huge opportunity to organize our communities for women to speak out, to tell their stories, and also to resist all these deceptive laws that are being passed, to resist the sneaky ways our rights are being taken away from us. In particular, one issue that we've been working on a lot, and I don't know if you know about that well, they've been trying to pass these anti-abortion laws by using racism and sexism. And so NAPOF is one of the leads on a campaign against deceptive race-selective or sex-selective abortion bans. So essentially, they tell women of color that we don't know how to make our own decisions, or that they particularly tell Asian women that they don't care about baby girls, you know, so importing lies from other countries. Therefore, this country has to start banning so-called sex-selective abortion bans. which is really false. And data shows that Asian Americans actually tend to have more baby girls than white Americans if you take things on average, and it's all a ruse, right? It's all a disguise to try to roll back our rights. So NAPOF has been really proud to be one of the lead architects of resistance against racist, sexist laws like these sex-selective abortion bans.
Wow. That sounds like some really amazing advocacy and activism, and thank you so much for doing the work that you do. Will you introduce our next guest?
I would be happy to. Joining us by Skype is Dr. Kumar, who is an abortion provider in Texas with Whole Women's Health. Dr. Kumar, are you with us?
Hi, Miriam. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's working and we can hear you. So,
Awesome.
Can you tell us about some of the stigma you face as a provider and why you continue to do this work despite that stigma?
Sure. So I would say that abortion providers definitely face stigma, especially in places like Texas, where I currently work. Unfortunately, my patients also deal with a ton of stigma. And the reason I do the work is because of the stories my patients share with me. It's usually these stories that drive my determination to provide abortion care in places like Texas, where I grew up and know so well. I'll also say that while I and many other providers face stigma in the work we do, I've chosen to focus on the privilege that I have and to use that privilege to be part of the movement that's trying to break down the stigma around abortion care. It seems like the opposition has really tried to depict abortion providers as second-grade physicians and abortion clinics as sort of scary places. But I think by speaking out about who I am and the work I do, it helps to show that abortion providers are regular people who care about their patients and most other doctors to help. We're passionate providers and we're driven by the morality.
That's great. And can you tell us, and it's so awesome that you came on because I was just talking about Asian Americans in Texas, and here you are, a living example of one online with us today. But Dr. Kumar, can you also tell us, what do you believe is at stake in this case?
Well, I'm not a lawyer or an expert on the Supreme Court, but I can say as a doctor providing abortion care here in Texas, I've seen some of the consequences of what happens when sham laws like this shut down access to safe abortion clinics. My patients are having to wait up to 3 weeks in some clinics to get an appointment because more than half the abortion clinics in Texas have closed over the past 2 years since the law went into effect. Some studies recently have shown that more women in Texas are inducing their own abortion. And the scene here in Texas is beginning to sound a lot like sort of pre-Roe days. I think what's at stake here is really the freedom and ability to choose what happens to your body, especially for low-income women and women of color. And I'm hoping that the decision will be favorable for my patients and women in Texas, as well as other women throughout the country. But I think what's at stake is bodily autonomy.
Right on. Thank you so much for joining us and for all the work that you do, Dr. Kumar.
And happy birthday as well.
Hey!
Yeah. So it looks like we are going to be rejoined on the phone now by Christine. Christine, hello and welcome. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Hi, thank you. Well, first, I'm really glad you guys are doing this. This is, I think, essential and definitely overdue, considering it's 2016, and here we are having to talk about this subject as it's up for review in our country. So, honestly, long story short, my ex-husband and I now, we already have had our son. We missed our time limits and all that stuff, so we ended up being 19-year-old parents. And this was in 2003 when he was finally born. My husband at the time went off to the military, so I was 20 at home with the baby. And that was a new experience, considering I was the one that had the ship-out date for the Air Force. But when I became pregnant, that was obviously not something that was going to happen. So a lot of different decisions were made. My husband at the time ended up going on to the military and then on to college. our son is 12 going on 13, and I'm still working on my degree. It hasn't quite come to fruition yet, but having a child is a full-time thing, so that's what we're doing. In 2008, we had a birth control fail. I'm not even sure what happens when it fails. We were on a daily birth control pill, and then suddenly I was pregnant. So whatever happened, we're calling it a birth control fail. And then here we are facing this decision again. At least, though, at the time, we weren't 19 and completely clueless and terrified. So this time, it wasn't even a question. We looked at each other and went, well, we're still trying to raise the one we have. We're still trying to go to college, and we're still trying to achieve these things. And I don't think this is a good time to even consider this subject. And that was literally all it took for the two of us to decide, okay, we're going to go do this. And it was I'm not going to say it was a painless process. Obviously, there's physical discomfort, but the process of going in, making the appointment, this time we were within our deadlines. That made it easier. And then when we went to the facility, all the people that worked in the facility were so good. There was no awkwardness. There was no whatever it is the media might portray, whatever anything negative that gives this idea that abortion is something that we're all so devastated to have done, and the conversation that leads up to it is just soul sapping, and it's horrific, or it's honestly more realistically two people or one person going, I'm not ready for this. This is not a good time for this. I'm going to make that appointment. And rock on to those of us that have to make that decision. So I'm not quite sure what else to say other than I think that this is a subject that's very strange and taboo, but for no real, tangible, understandable reason, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm glad that I'm having the chance to speak, because I do want people to know that I'm a totally normal person in a just totally normal world in which the timing was not okay. It was just not right. And we weren't confident in our ability to care for a second child when we were still struggling to care for ourselves and our first. And that was literally it. That was all it took for us. And the process in itself was guided by incredible staff and really good clinicians who were patient with us and who took us through everything step by step and never once made me feel like this was a horrible thing I was doing. It was simply like it could have been going to get my annual pap smear done. It was such a normal part of healthcare that it's not something that either one of us, even to this day, dwell on or talk about or think about every day. It wasn't one of those situations where we were devastated or where it hurt us to do this, because we felt, we came first. Our relationship came first. Our son came first. We were still trying to reach other goals, and that was it. So, yeah.
The Supreme Court, as they decide this historic case, what would you want them to know?
I want them to know that I don't know what might be in their head at this point. I mean, they've all been there a long time, and these are not, I would think that they're not arguments they've not heard before. I want to think that they've done their research and that they've talked to women and that they know that we're people. This is not something that needs to go outside of me and my doctor. I'm not sure why it should. And I would like them to remember our voices, remember our faces as we tell them, hey, this is what it was like for us. And sometimes we were thwarted in our ability to achieve our basic health care, but at the same time, when it does happen and we're not thwarted and we go through with it, we're not devastated. I'm not hurting. I'm not terrified. I'm not sad. I'm still smiling, and I just want them to know that and keep that image in their head. We're all still smiling.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us today. Miriam?
Thank you so much for doing this. You guys are rock stars.
Thank you so much. Miriam, who's next?
Right now, I'd like to welcome Ann Hopkins, who will join us via Skype. Welcome, Ann. Tell us your story.
In 1965, I was a 18-year-old sophomore at UC Santa Barbara and had a responsible, steady boyfriend. I was the worst expert on my life. I wasn't mature enough for marriage, let alone rearing a child alone and supporting him or her without a college degree. I suspected I was pregnant. No simple kits at the drugstore for us gals back then. So 2 trips to a doctor's office later, I learned that yes, I was pregnant. I resolved to terminate the pregnancy, even at the risk of dying. And I'd heard all the stories. Within a week or so, my boyfriend and I drove to a bar in Tijuana, Mexico. A man came to collect what would be $2,200 in today's money and take me to a secret location. When my boyfriend was told he could not come with me, my apprehension turned to fear. So now there I am, alone in Mexico, with 2 strange men, and nobody who cares about me knows where I am. In the car, the only thing I remember seeing was gated white hacienda in an affluent neighborhood. Before that, I think I may have been blindfolded. I don't remember for sure. But inside the hacienda, I saw a busy, sterile-looking operation. And let me tell you, white can be a very reassuring color. The actual abortion was brief, with little pain, and seemed medically sound to me. I was driven back to the bar. In the following weeks, I had no complications and did not pursue follow-up care. I was one of the lucky ones. Had my boyfriend not been able to arrange for the illegal abortion, I'm sure I would have figured out how to do it myself. Back then, I would have had to scour medical books for instruction. No Google or YouTube to the rescue for us. As the months rolled on, I resumed my college life with no regrets, but occasional spurts of what I assessed then as if the government thought abortion needed to be legal, maybe it was me that was wrong about what I thought my responsible moral choice was. Over time, I recognized that I had just bought into ignorant, irrational social controls. When I made an appointment with the doctor to get birth control pills, they were fairly new back then. He refused to write a prescription because I was not married. Catch-22. When anti-abortion protesters proclaimed that they're here because others chose not to abort them, I immediately thought about my own daughters, the flip side of that one. At the time of my abortion, I had inside me maybe 300 or 400 potential children. Had I not arrested the development of that first potential child, I would never have met my stepdaughter, and my natural daughter would never have been born. That is a heartbreaking thought. Now, I'd like to roll right into my instructions to the justices. I'd be surprised if the justices will watch the videos. But for those acquaintances of justices who are watching today, please pick up the phone, pause on the keyboard to tell them your stories, and do it now before March 2nd. Help them see that the 1 in 3 statistic holds for the women they know and admire. that all women's stories are snowflake different, and we are capable of complex moral reasoning and balancing interests. Legislators and judges needn't do it for us. I'm particularly concerned about the poor Catholic male justices itching to overturn Roe. Brain science tells us that our beliefs are formed first in life, and that after the pursuit of evidence, we spend the rest of our life defending, justifying, and rationalizing them with a host of intellectual reason, cogent argument, and rational explanation. These justices may well find legal rationale to impose their childhood religious beliefs about souls and sins on the rest of us, in violation of the Constitution's Establishment Clause, by the way. And here's the scary part. They won't even be aware we're doing it. They need our help. That's it. I'm done.
Thanks so much, Anne, and we'll make sure that Justice Kennedy gets your message, all right?
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the 1 in 3 Speak Out. In a few short months, the Supreme Court will decide the most important abortion rights case in 2 decades. They're going to rule on whether the insidious law that closed most abortion clinics in Texas violates the right to abortion. 45 reproductive health organizations filed briefs urging the Supreme Court to once again uphold a woman's constitutional right to access safe and legal abortion services. Advocates for Youth was proud to be among them, submitting a unique brief compiled entirely of women's real abortion stories from the 1 in 3 campaign. And now we're continuing with our People's Brief. We're addressing the Supreme Court directly and demanding that they listen to our stories. As many of you know, here in the United States, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime. Despite the fact that abortion is a very common procedure, we rarely talk openly about our decisions to end a pregnancy. For too long, conversations about abortion have been dominated by politicians and anti-choice activists who use shame and stigma as a tool to silence people and to advance legislation that limits access to abortion services. And today, we're asking the court to listen to a different conversation, one that is grounded in the lived experiences of real people, one that works towards building community rather than isolation, building compassion rather than shaming, a conversation that recognizes that access to abortion and the ability to plan when and if you carry a pregnancy to term is crucial to the ability to protect not only your own future, but your family's, and which honors everyone's right to dignity and autonomy. I'm privileged to be one of the hosts for this historic event. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to the many people who will be joining us later with their personal stories. In the previous hour, I hope you didn't miss it, but if you did, we heard from Mariam, who experienced many obstacles in obtaining her abortion while she was in Kenya. We heard from Anne, who in the years before Roe v. Wade was forced to travel to Mexico for her abortion, and she had a powerful message for the justices. And we heard from the creator of East Los High, the popular Hulu series that has highlighted the need for real conversations around sex, sexuality, and abortion. All of us have a role to play in shattering stigma and ensuring that we have the access to the safe and legal abortion care we deserve. So you can join the conversation today. Tell us your story, or tell us what you like to say to the Supreme Court as they make their decision in this case. Throughout the day, we'll be sharing stories and comments from the hashtag 1 in 3 Speaks, or share your story via text by texting SHARE, S-H-A-R-E, to 877-877. And together, we're going to make sure the Supreme Court knows that real people are at the center of decisions about access to abortion care. And if you're watching today and would like to support the work of Advocates for Youth and the 1 in 3 campaign, please visit www.1in3campaign.org/donate. I'd like to take a moment now to interview my fabulous co-host, Brianna, a 1 in 3 activist and a student at Harvard.
Yes.
My mom would be so proud of you.
Oh.
So how did you get into doing work for reproductive justice?
So I would say that I've identified as a feminist for most of my life. I was raised by a single mom, and I think that she's been a real inspiration in almost everything that I've done. And she's incredibly supportive of the work that I do. I'm really lucky to have, from a young age, been taught that my body is something I have control over and something that I should honor. And because of that, I think it's really alarming to see the number of legal and social and cultural threats, especially to the bodily autonomy of people who don't identify as men. And so what that means is that I've spent a lot of my high school and college years just starting conversations with people about the importance of being educated about your own body, being educated about the experiences that you have with your body, knowing that it's okay to talk about things that other people would shame you for, or that stigma is sort of smushing down. And especially when it comes to abortion, I'm passionate about making sure that people on my campus at Harvard know that I'm a person that they can talk to about their abortion experiences, that I'm a person they can go to if they have questions about where to get an abortion in the Boston area. I want to be a resource to people because I would hope that someone else would be that resource if I wasn't. And so I'm incredibly passionate about making sure that these conversations are happening in my own community, and I'm incredibly excited to be here today, opening up the conversation to a national community.
That's amazing. I've got 2 little girls too, trying to teach them similar things.
Yes,
so
yes.
Afterwards, you'll have to share some advice that your mom gave you.
Oh yeah, lots of good parenting.
Why do you think it's so critical for us to really lift up and support young people's leadership in this movement right now?
So I think, as we've seen, this is a movement that is a long game. It's something that individuals have been rallying around for decades, and I think it's something that isn't going to wind down anytime soon. I think that this Supreme Court case is a really good example of why we need continued efforts to defend the constitutional rights that we've won that are constantly under attack. And so what that means, I think, is nurturing people who are interested in learning about these topics and being able to discuss them and being able to advocate for themselves and their peers. And doing so in a way that really uplifts their voices and their perspectives. I think being able to value youth perspectives in this movement allows for us to build a sustainable movement, one that can last into the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years if need be, because we know that the opposition is incredibly mobilizing youth as well. So by valuing youth voices and youth perspectives in the work that we do, I think we're really committing ourselves to building good leadership and leadership that is holistic and intersectional and brings in a lot of inclusive voices in the ways that we need them to be heard.
That's so fantastic. Thank you for everything that you do. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. And to our viewers today, if you'd like to support my work and the work of 1 in 3 activists on campuses across the nation, please visit 1in3campaign.org/donate.
Thanks for being here, Brianna. Can you introduce our next guest?
Absolutely. I'm happy to introduce Rebecca, who will be joining us via Skype. Rebecca, please start whenever you're ready.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me. So I was 16, and it was in Wisconsin, and I had an official boyfriend. That summer we spent the weekend drinking wine coolers and Miller Lite. It was a fun summer, but by the end, I was pregnant. I was scared. Having kids is something I've never thought about yet. I felt a lot of fear in the possibility of telling parents. So I called my best friend, and it just happened that her sister had given me information about him. My friend's phone number and appointment as possible. Planned Parenthood information on my different options. My decision was I wasn't to have a child, and I couldn't tell my parents that this had happened. I had to drive to Minnesota to get the abortion because I wasn't 18 yet. And I hated my parents because I'd had it in Wisconsin. My boyfriend drove me to elections, but also with the awareness of my decision to make. When I got to Minnesota, I had to meet with a judge.
So sorry. We're having some technical difficulties. We're going to have to reload you for a second. And in the meantime, viewers, we're thrilled to share a pre-recorded message from our friend Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Planned Parenthood, as you know, works tirelessly to give everyone the reproductive health options they need, even in the face of targeted harassment and campaigns. Here's Cecile.
Hi, I'm Cecile Richards, president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Right now, around the country, politicians are trying to stop women from accessing safe and legal abortion. In my home state of Texas, they have passed laws aimed at closing health centers that provide abortion care, forcing women to travel long distances to access the care that they need. This year, the Supreme Court will consider those laws in the most important abortion rights case in decades. As a nation, we have to protect access to safe and legal abortion, because if we lose our right to control our bodies, we lose our right to everything else. Almost a third, or 1 in 3, women in this country have had an abortion. I did, and it was the right decision for me. This year, the court and the American people will determine what kind of country we want, whether women should have the right to freely determine what is best for themselves, or whether we will erase decades of progress. There's not a mother in this country who wants her daughter to have fewer rights than she did. It's never been more important to speak out and stand up for ourselves, for our daughters, and for future generations who dream of building a future on their own terms.